Arguably the two hottest action cameras on the market right now, the DJI Action 3 and the GoPro Hero 11 Black. In today's video, I'll compare both of these, let you know which one works better in which scenario, and ultimately help you decide which one to buy. Now, obviously, since those two are action cameras, the number one thing we need to start off with is the camera quality. We have all sorts of different frame rates, different resolutions, different settings that are not available on the other cameras, so we need to focus on that real quick. Starting off with a handheld test of the two cameras where I shoot in the highest resolution they offer at 30 frames per second, built-in stabilization, regular wide lens, normal color profile, and all automatic settings for ISO and shutter speed. Reason why I do this is because I like to see what the cameras think when they are left to decide for themselves. That way you can really spot a strong or a weak point of a camera. And now already you can see a slight difference in the colors coming from the two cameras, with slightly warmer colors from the GoPro as well as a different shade of the blue color when looking at the sky or the water, for example. Turning the cameras towards the sun shows a little bit of a better dynamic range from the GoPro. Notice the shadows in the corner and the overall look of the shot. I think it's a bit cleaner and brighter altogether. Overall, I don't think there's a huge difference in the quality from both of these cameras, but I do think the GoPro is the better one in this case. Switching to some slow motion and underwater footage, and what I can say is that both cameras are impressive, allowing for some really nice slow-mo footage with not much difference in the look of the image apart from the slight difference in the shade of the blue color that I mentioned earlier. However, there is a noticeable shake in the footage from the Action 3, as I believe there is no stabilization applied to it, or at least there is no such option in the settings, whereas on the GoPro you can still use hypersmooth even in this 120 frames per second slow-mo mode. So, a point for the GoPro here. Next, we have a test for the vlogging capabilities of these cameras, both for audio and video. Starting off first with this little walking test where I mostly want to focus on the look of the image, the dynamic range, and the sun flares, which sometimes could be a bit distracting and annoying. Notice how much wider the field of view on the Action 3 is, while still using wide lens options for both cameras. Of course, you can use super view or even hyper view on the GoPro, but the distortion becomes a bit too much, so I wouldn't really recommend it. For a really wide angle shot, I've used the new 8:7 aspect ratio on the GoPro and the ultra wide angle on the Action 3, and I don't think they're that useful for vlogging, to be honest, because of that distortion they create. But for action shots, both of these are great as they capture a lot more area in the frame. If you like what I'm doing here on this channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and join the Supreme team. Next, we have a running test to check out the built-in stabilization. I definitely prefer the look of the Action 3, although both cameras are quite close. However, there is a bit more shake in the footage from the GoPro, so a point for Action 3 here. A new feature of the GoPro that I really like is linear plus horizon lock, in which the horizon is level no matter how you turn the camera, which is quite cool and could work really well for some specific shots. And on the other hand, we have the Action 3, which has a similar feature, but instead of a full 360 rotation, it has a limit of a 45-degree tilt, after which it tilts the horizon in the direction you're turning the camera. I think this is a more standard approach which will be enough for most scenarios, but it's cool to see that GoPro is trying out something quite unusual and the results are pretty good. Moving on to the test that I'm mostly excited about, putting both of these cameras on one of my FPV drones. This is particularly interesting for me as that's a big use case for me and all the action cameras I use on a regular basis, so seeing which one will be better for flying with is a big deal. Starting off with the Action 3, which I already had some impressions of from my initial review of the camera, and I can say it does work great on an FPV drone, having the typical stabilization glitches, if I can even call them that way, in the footage. This happens mostly when you do a sharp turn and it takes a bit of time for the camera to readjust the stabilization for that new angle you've taken with the drone. It's not a big deal, but I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest. In terms of colors, I used the flat color profile here and I graded the footage myself in post, looking to see what I will be dealing with if I start flying with this camera on a regular basis. Keep in mind, I still don't have any ND filters for this camera, so locking the settings will definitely result in a smoother footage with better motion blur, but even now I'm happy with the results I'm getting. I'm really looking forward to having 10-bit color on this camera as well as gyro data from the footage as soon as possible. I think it will make a world of difference and I cannot wait for it. As for the GoPro, there really isn't anything bad to say about this camera. I've been using all the GoPros from Hero 6 onwards on my FPV drones, so I definitely know what I'm dealing with. And although Hypersmooth is good, it has those same glitches as the Action 3 when using it for FPV. The real power of this camera, however, is not the stabilization. It's the 10-bit color, allowing you to push the colors a bit more, and most importantly, real steady. Turning off the stabilization of the camera and running the footage through real steady is like a cheat code for buttery smooth footage. It's crazy how good it looks. Plus, you have all the settings you can adjust in the software itself if you prefer to apply more stabilization or less stabilization, depending on the look you're going for. So for FPV, I'm definitely going to choose the GoPro. When it comes to the size and weight, the Action 3 wins by being a little bit smaller, being 10 grams lighter, coming up at 145 grams compared to the 155 on the GoPro. It has smaller bezels, or at least smaller form factor with similar sized bezels. The display on the back is very similar, but the GoPro has bigger bezels. And the front display is also touchscreen, whereas on the GoPro 11 it's not a touchscreen, meaning that if you want to quickly change your modes and you have put this on a mount where you don't have access to the back screen, it will be far easier for the Action 3 to reconfigure those settings, whereas on the GoPro you need to remove it, get to the back screen, change those settings and then put it back on the mount, which definitely takes away from the shot and you can lose some precious seconds. It might not look like it, but it's quite windy today and I'm in the local park trying out the different settings that these cameras have to offer, and I think it's a great way to not only check out the visual side of things but also the sound aspect. So how does it sound coming from the GoPro 11 right here, and now how does it sound coming from the DJI Action 3? You let me know which one you prefer down in the comments. And just judging by the colors that I'm seeing on the front displays of these two cameras, I can see that the colors are a bit different, even though I'm using the same settings on both cameras. Normal color profile, no flat, just letting the cameras do their thing and decide which settings they want to use. Now, I realize this might be a little bit extreme, but since it's so ridiculously windy out here, I wanted to check out the wind reduction feature on both of these cameras, the DJI Action 3 and the GoPro 11 Black. Now, both of these cameras have the wind reduction turned on and neither of them has any external microphones or anything else that will muffle the sound. I'm only relying on their internals to pick up the sound, and since it's so ridiculously windy out here, at one point I couldn't even hear my thoughts. I would be really interested to check out and see which camera will perform better. So if you're vlogging and that's something that really matters to you, hopefully at least one of the two cameras will be able to produce a little bit better sound, so you know which one to pick up if you want to vlog in very windy conditions. Now, when it comes to overheating, I know for a fact that people have been experiencing issues with GoPros for a very long time, overheating when shooting in higher frame rates and higher resolution, and even some people have said that the Action 3 overheats every now and then. But maybe it's the way I use these cameras. I'm always outside, I'm always even flying them on my drone, or I'm doing some action sports where there's a lot of airflow. Now, of course, if I put this in a drawer and let it shoot for 1 hour in 4K 120 frames per second, it will overheat, that's for sure. And it's probably the same way for the DJI Action 3, but that's not how you use action cameras. For all of those people who test their action cameras on a desk and let them shoot for like 1 hour in 4K 120 frames per second, that's just stupid in my opinion. So you should never test your camera in that way, because it's an action camera. You don't use it inside a drawer. You don't shoot 120 frames per second video for 1 hour. So it just makes no sense. To finish this chapter off, I've never had any overheating issues with any of the two cameras. Something else that I want to focus on is the mounting mechanism and the mounting options these cameras use. And here the DJI Action 3 definitely takes the win, because it's so incredibly easy to attach the camera to the magnetic attachment that it has. It takes literally just a couple of seconds. You just need to make sure it's properly latched to the magnets and you're good to go. If you want to remove it, You just press on these little two hinges and the camera is free from this mount and you can use it on something else. Whereas on the GoPro, we've seen that sturdy but old school finger mechanism that we've seen on many other action cameras before. It's actually not that bad, but compared to the magnetic way of attaching the camera, it just takes so much more time and effort to do it. I know it's not the biggest thing in the world, but I definitely prefer the magnetic attachment of the Action 3. Since now everyone is getting crazy about shooting vertical videos with their phone, their camera, their drone, these action cameras are trying to do that as well. And while on the GoPro you don't have a dedicated vertical mount to shoot in that vertical orientation, you can still use the 8:7 aspect ratio that will allow you to crop your video in 16:9 and also in 9:16, making it easier for you to use that same footage for two different purposes. YouTube, for example, and social media like TikTok and Instagram. And I think that's a lot easier than having to reshoot everything you want to shoot twice, once in vertical and once in horizontal orientation. However, I need to point out that the DJI Action 3 comes with this casing that also has magnetic attachment on the bottom, meaning that you can attach it like so, and you have a vertical shooting camera that you don't need to to sacrifice the quality and crop from your 16:9 footage. You can shoot like this. However, if you want to repurpose your footage for different social networks, you won't be able if you only shoot like this in vertical. Battery life. This is huge, as usually action cameras go through the batteries very quickly, and I did a little test when I compared these cameras side by side. I went out the house and both the cameras were charged to 100%, and I used them pretty much in the same scenario for the same amount of time, everything was the same. And at the end of the test, the GoPro was at about 26% battery, whereas the Action 3 still had about 50% if I'm not mistaken. So the Action 3 performed twice as good as the GoPro, but that's to be expected as I was only shooting in 4K 30 frames per second on the Action 3, whereas on the GoPro I was filming in 5.3K 30 frames per second, and I was switching between 16:9 and 8:7 aspect ratio, both in 10-bit, so that definitely eats up a whole lot more out of the battery. So still something to consider if you want to go for the GoPro. Make sure you stock up on your spare batteries because you will go through them very quickly. When it's time to charge, the DJI Action 3 takes the win, as it can go up to 80% on the battery in just 18 minutes with the USB-C fast charging, which is amazing. And the GoPro is a lot slower, taking some more time to fully charge the battery, or at least go to the same percentage. It will take a lot more time to get to it. And one of the most important things that actually sell these cameras is how much they cost. And unfortunately, we almost don't have any competition when it comes to the price. The GoPro Hero 11 Black costs $400 if you have a GoPro subscription, and if you don't have one, it will cost you $500 just for the basic camera. Compare that to the $329, which is the cost of the DJI Action 3, and it's like a no-brainer if you are a little bit tight on the budget and you don't want to spend as much. This definitely takes the win when it comes to the price. Especially if you add the Adventure combo, which comes with the extendable selfie stick, with 2 more batteries, with a few more action mounts, which is going to cost you $439, and it's still cheaper than just the basic package of the GoPro Hero 11 Black. So really not much to say when it comes to the price. It really is a no-brainer. If you're looking for a more affordable option, this is the one. So what's the better camera? Which one do I recommend? Honestly, I feel like the DJI Action 3 gives you the most bang for your buck, gives you the better overall user experience while using it as an action camera. It's also far easier to switch from one mount to another by using the magnetic system. And generally, for the price you're paying, which is $329 for the basic package of the camera, it is a steal for what you're getting. The GoPro is great, don't get me wrong, and it's most probably what I will be using going forward on my FPV drones while shooting FPV. But at least until we get 10-bit on the Action 3 and we have gyro data so we can stabilize the footage with GyroFlow, I will keep using real steady with a GoPro 11 and that 10-bit color. because it will be the best for my needs. However, when it comes to not flying FPV and using this as an action camera, I prefer the Action 3 because it just works better. It's far easier to set up. It has better audio, has better user interface. It makes it a little bit easier for me to set it up and start shooting straight away. It has that front touchscreen display, which makes it easier for me to change those settings on the fly while doing something with the camera, so I don't have to remove it from the mount and access the back screen. So in general, I prefer the way the Action 3 works as an action camera. As an FPV camera that I attach on my drones, for now the GoPro takes the cake because it has the better detail, it has better dynamic range, it has better colors, and with that 10-bit color I will be able to push the footage a little bit more. So again, I am very happy to see this competition between DJI and GoPro. I think both are great and both have their strengths and weaknesses. I really can't say that one is trash and another one is just amazing. Both are great, but just really comes down to how you use your camera, because all of us are different. We all use our cameras in a different way for different purposes. And for my purposes, the Action 3 will be more used on the ground. The GoPro 11 will be more used in the air on a drone. With that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I tried to make it as least biased as possible. We all have our own preferences, but I try to be open-minded and just take all of these things as they are and not have a personal opinion on them. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please let me know in the comment section below if you did. Subscribe for more videos like this one. This will be greatly appreciated. This is Mike from Drone Supremacy. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.